So imagine this. Someone has a minor stroke. You'd think the worst is over, right? Well, not exactly. The clock is now ticking because a much bigger, more devastating stroke could be just days away. The culprit is often a blocked artery in the neck. Now, we've got two main ways to fix it. We can either go in and surgically remove that blockage, or we can prop the artery open with a tiny metal scaffold called a stent. But here's the twist. A massive study found there's a third factor that's absolutely critical: timing. Does acting fast with the wrong tool actually do more harm than good? Let's dig in.
Here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll talk about why a minor stroke is actually a major emergency. Then, we'll get into the two main treatments and the giant study that put them head-to-head. Next, we'll see how the data reveals that timing is everything. We'll also unpack the science behind something called the hot plaque. It's the key to understanding all of this. And finally, we'll see how this research has completely changed how doctors handle this situation today.
All right, Section 1. A stroke's dangerous aftermath. Just how serious is this ticking clock?
So, let's ask the big question. What is the risk after a so-called minor stroke, or what doctors call a transient ischemic attack, a TIA? The word minor can be really deceiving. Is the danger really over? Not even close. And here is the single most important thing to understand right at the start. The risk of having a massive, life-altering stroke is at its absolute peak in the first few days after that initial warning sign. This isn't just a concern, it's a full-blown emergency. Doctors are in a race against time because acting fast is the only thing that can prevent a catastrophe.
So that brings us right to Section 2, the critical treatment question. We know we have to act fast, but we have two main tools to fix that blocked artery. Which one is the right one, especially when the pressure is on? Okay, so let's break down our two options. First, you've got carotid endarterectomy, or CEA for short. Think of this like plumbing. It's the direct approach. A surgeon literally opens up the artery in your neck and physically scrapes out the gunk, the plaque that's causing the blockage. Then you have carotid artery stenting, or CAS. This one's less invasive, which sounds appealing, right? A doctor threads a tiny tube, a catheter, all the way from your leg up to your neck, and then deploys a stent to basically prop open the artery from the inside. So two very different methods, but they both have the exact same goal: get the blood flowing again and stop that big stroke from happening.
So, which one do you choose? How do you decide? Well, luckily we don't have to guess. A huge landmark analysis called the Carotid Stenosis Trialists Collaboration decided to find a definitive answer by pooling the data from some of the biggest medical trials in the world. And the way they did this is what makes the results so powerful. This wasn't just one study. It was a meta-analysis. They took the raw individual data from 4 of the most important trials ever done in this field. They looked only at symptomatic patients, people who'd already had that warning shot, TIA or minor stroke. And they directly compared the safety of surgery versus stenting, paying very close attention to when the procedure was done after the symptoms started.
And just look at the scale of this thing. We're talking about data from 4,138 patients. That is a massive number in medical research. It means the conclusions they drew are incredibly reliable and not just a fluke.
Okay, Section 3. Timing is decisive. This is where things get really interesting, because the data starts to tell a very clear story. And boom, here it is, the single most important finding from the entire study. Look at this. For patients who were treated within that critical first week, the risk of having another stroke or even dying was a staggering 8.4% if they got a stent. Now look at the surgery group, just 1.3%. I mean, that is a night and day difference. It's not even in the same ballpark.
Let's just put one number on that to really let it sink in. In that first week, choosing a stent instead of surgery meant you were 6.7 times more likely to have a stroke or die. 6.7 times. In medicine, that is an absolutely massive difference. Okay, so you might be thinking, what if you just wait a bit longer? Does stenting get safer? And yeah, it does a little. The risk drops to 7.1%. But now look at the surgery group. Its risk is still just 3.6%. So even after that first week, surgery is still about twice as safe. The gap gets smaller, but surgery is still the clear winner on safety.
So the big question is, why? Why on earth is stenting so much riskier early on? Well, let's dive into the fascinating science behind these numbers in Section 4, the hot plaque problem.
It all comes down to this idea of the hot plaque. See, when a piece of plaque causes a stroke or a TIA, it's because it just ruptured. And right after that happens, in those first few days, that plaque is, well, it's angry. It's unstable, it's inflamed, it's soft, and it's incredibly likely to crumble and send little pieces flying up to the brain. It's basically a ticking time bomb sitting right inside your artery.
And this process explains everything we've just seen. In those first 7 days, that plaque is hot and fragile. Now imagine trying to thread wires and catheters past it to place a stent. It's like poking a hornet's nest with a stick. You're just asking to break off a piece and cause another stroke. But if you wait a week or two, the body starts to do its thing. It begins to heal that rupture, forming a little scar over the surface. The plaque cools down, it becomes more stable, and that is exactly why the risk of stenting gets lower over time.
And what about surgery? Well, this is its genius. Surgery completely sidesteps this whole problem. It doesn't try to carefully sneak past the hot plaque. Nope, it just goes in, cuts it out, and removes the source of the danger altogether. That's why it's so much safer in that critical early window. It takes the time bomb out of the equation.
Which brings us to our final section, the evidence-based answer. How does all of this incredible data actually change things for patients in the real world?
Well, this research isn't just sitting in a journal somewhere. It is the foundation of modern stroke prevention. It directly shapes the rules doctors follow. Just look at the 2023 guidelines from the European Society for Vascular Surgery. They are crystal clear. If a patient is a good candidate for surgery, you do it within 7 days. If for some reason you have to do a stent, you should wait at least 14 days to let that hot plaque cool down.
Now, of course, no study is absolutely perfect. The big strengths here are obviously the huge number of patients from top-tier trials and the fact that the people judging the outcomes were blinded. They didn't know which treatment the patient got. The main limitation is that the timing itself wasn't randomized. Doctors chose when to operate. But even with that, the signal from the data is just overwhelmingly strong.
So let's bring it all home with a real-world scenario. A 65-year-old comes to the hospital a day after having some temporary weakness on one side. An ultrasound shows a 70% blockage in their neck artery. Based on everything we've just learned, what's the plan?
The evidence gives us a very clear answer. You offer that patient surgery, and you do it soon, ideally within the next few days. You explain that waiting raises their stroke risk and that choosing a stent right now would be significantly more dangerous than the surgery.
And really, it all comes down to this one simple, powerful, and incredibly memorable phrase that sums up this entire high-stakes decision. When the plaque is hot, you cut, you don't stent. It's a critical piece of wisdom backed by powerful evidence that truly saves lives.